In the vast emptiness of space, where silence reigned and the stars glowed like distant beacons, a faint pulse disrupted the quiet of the cosmos. Earth's monitoring stations detected the anomaly, a signal traveling across the void at an unimaginable speed, its source unknown, and its message fragmented but urgent. The signal seemed almost like a whisper, a cry for help that echoed through the blackness. The frequency was unlike anything the scientists had encountered before, but the tone was unmistakable. Desperation radiated from it. At the United Earth Defense Command headquarters, the initial discovery was met with confusion and uncertainty. Screens flickered as they displayed the signal in a way that made little sense to the untrained eye, but to those with experience in the deep unknown, it was a riddle, one that beckoned for a solution. Commander Adrian Cross sat back in his chair, his brow furrowed as he stared at the data streaming in front of him. Every instinct told him this was no ordinary transmission. Something about it felt wrong, but too important to ignore. After all, Earth had long feared the possibility of an alien race watching them, and now it seemed as though that possibility was becoming a reality. The message was brief, only a few broken words punctuated by static, but one thing was clear: the signal was from the distant Xylaxian system, a star system that humanity had never heard of before, and the message carried a warning and a plea for help. Whoever was behind it was in dire straits, and their message was meant for Earth alone. Earth's military had always been prepared for the worst, but this felt different. The usual tactics of responding to unidentified signals simply weren't enough. The stakes had just grown too high. Captain Sarah Vance was called in to investigate the signal, a woman known for her brilliance and unorthodox methods. She was tasked with leading a team of experts to determine if the message was legitimate or a trap. Vance had a reputation for thinking outside the box, and while others might have dismissed the signal as a malfunction or a deliberate hoax, she had an uncanny ability to sense the underlying truth behind strange phenomena. Vance paced the command deck of the newly constructed ship, the Prometheus, a vessel equipped with Earth's best technology and capable of reaching the edge of the galaxy faster than anything humanity had ever built. Her mind raced as she considered the implications of the signal. She had heard of no alien race called the Xylaxians, and yet here they were in their own voice, reaching out across the stars. Her crew had been assembled quickly and efficiently, a mix of soldiers, engineers, scientists, and linguists, each one selected for their expertise and their ability to think on their feet in the face of the unknown. As the Prometheus began its journey toward the distant Xylaxian system, the crew knew they were heading into uncharted territory. The silence of space stretched before them like an abyss, and yet they could feel the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. They were about to become the first humans to venture beyond the familiar borders of their world and into the unknown. Whether they were prepared for what they might find was another question entirely. The signal was faint, but it was clear enough to guide them to their destination. Every passing day brought them closer to an encounter with whatever awaited them at the edge of the galaxy, and despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Captain Vance felt a sense of resolve growing within her. They had no choice but to answer the call, whatever the cost. The briefing room was filled with the quiet hum of machinery and the occasional clinking of boots against the metal floor as Earth's best minds gathered around a holographic table. Captain Sarah Vance stood at the head of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of those who would accompany her on this unprecedented mission. There was a tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that the journey ahead was far more than just a routine exploration. This was the unknown, and it carried with it dangers and uncertainties that no one could predict. Vance knew her team would be the first to set foot in an alien system, and they would have to rely on each other more than ever before. Among them was Dr. Anwar Malik, an expert in ancient languages and alien cultures. His reputation as a brilliant linguist was unrivaled, but he had never encountered anything like this before. His eyes flicked nervously between the holographic map and Vance's piercing gaze. The signal was unlike any known form of communication, a puzzle without a clear solution. His mind raced with possibilities, but none of them felt right. There was something strange about the message, a hidden meaning that didn't quite sit well. At the table beside Malik sat Lieutenant Maria Cruz, a tactical officer known for her quick thinking under pressure. Cruz had seen battle many times before, but she had never encountered an enemy she couldn't understand. She was a veteran of Earth's military forces, and while her expertise in combat strategy was unmatched, she knew that this mission was unlike any war she had fought in. She had a feeling that when they arrived at the Xylaxian system, they would be walking into a battlefield of a different kind. Admiral Jonas Huxley, the mission's senior military advisor, stood at the edge of the room, his posture rigid and stoic. His experience in interstellar warfare was vast, but this was his first deep space mission to a completely unknown system, unlike the familiar threats Earth had faced. Before this was something new. His mind was calculating the risk of their mission, wondering whether the potential for an ambush was too great. But even with his reservations, he knew the importance of the task ahead. Earth had never been faced with such a scenario, where the stakes could mean the survival or annihilation of an entire species. Finally, there was Lieutenant Commander Kate Donovan, a systems engineer with a deep understanding of advanced technology. She had been tasked with ensuring that their ship, the Prometheus, was equipped to handle any potential dangers they might encounter, from alien ships to unknown environments. Her expertise would be crucial as they entered the Xylaxian system. She wasn't afraid of the unknown, but even she had moments of doubt as she stared at the map of the distant stars. The thought of encountering a race capable of sending such a powerful distress signal filled her with a sense of unease. As Vance spoke to the team, she emphasized that this mission would require not just intelligence and skill, but trust in one another and adaptability in the face of challenges they couldn't yet comprehend. The Xylaxians were unknown to humanity, and if they were in danger, it was only a matter of time before Earth might find itself caught in the crossfire of a galactic war, a war that no one on Earth had even begun to prepare for. Despite the tension, there was a quiet determination in the room. Each person knew that they had been chosen not just for their abilities, but because Earth was relying on them to be the first ambassadors of humanity to whatever lay beyond the stars. As the team assembled, they understood that this journey was more than just a mission. It was a moment in history that would define their place in the universe forever. With a final nod, Vance dismissed the team, and as they filed out of the room, one by one, a single thought echoed in each of their minds. This was no longer just a job. It was a fight for survival, and for answers that could change everything. The journey through the cold vastness of space was uneventful, the silence broken only by the hum of the Prometheus's engines as it sped toward the Xylaxian system. Captain Sarah Vance sat alone in her quarters, staring at the blinking stars outside the observation window. The weight of the mission bore down on her shoulders. She was leading humanity into the unknown, and the responsibility felt like 1,000 tons. The Xylaxians, whoever they were, had reached out in desperation. That much was clear. But the question that haunted her mind was whether Earth's involvement would be the salvation they hoped for, or a fatal mistake. The crew moved with quiet purpose, each person preparing for what they might encounter. Dr. Anwar Malik spent his days poring over the encrypted signal, attempting to decode more of the fragmented words, but each attempt revealed only more questions. Lieutenant Maria Cruz kept a close eye on tactical scans, ensuring that the ship stayed on course, but her instincts told her they were walking into something much darker than they could imagine. Admiral Jonas Huxley was less than comfortable, his mind constantly running calculations for potential combat scenarios. He had seen many battles, but he knew nothing about the Xylaxians or the Xylaxians. And Lieutenant Commander Kate Donovan worked tirelessly with the engineers to ensure the Prometheus was prepared for whatever obstacles lay ahead. Then, the moment arrived. The Xylaxian system came into view, a cold, distant star surrounded by a cluster of planets. The Prometheus entered the outer orbit, and the crew collectively held their breath as they gazed upon a shattered reality. The Xylaxian space station, once a grand beacon of technological achievement, was now a ghostly ruin, its broken hull floating in the emptiness like the corpse of a dying civilization. Vance's heart sank. There was no sign of battle, but the station's damage was unmistakable. Something Something catastrophic had happened here. "We're not alone," said Cruz, her voice cold, scanning the area. The sensors were picking up faint readings of active energy. Something was still functional on the station. Vance stood tall, her voice firm. "Prepare to dock." "Dr. Malik, you're up." Malik nodded, adjusting his glasses, his heart racing. The team suited up, ready for whatever they might find, and boarded a smaller shuttle to approach the station. The Xylaxian vessel was a marvel of engineering, sleek and angular with glistening black surfaces that reflected the distant light of their star. But it had been abandoned, or worse, destroyed. The crew entered the station cautiously, the air thick with the scent of decay. The interior was eerily silent, the dim lights flickering above them. It felt as though the station had been abandoned in haste, with personal items left behind, as if its inhabitants had fled in fear. They moved cautiously through the corridors, following the faint signal that had led them here. It wasn't long before they found what they had come for. A group of Xylaxian survivors huddled in a darkened control room, their forms frail and weak. Their skin was a soft, bluish hue, their elongated limbs trembling with exhaustion. They looked nothing like the militarized species Earth had imagined. These beings were not warriors. They were civilians, scientists, engineers, people who had been caught in the middle of an unspeakable disaster. Their leader, General Threx, stood at the center of the group, his eyes filled with both relief and despair. He was a towering figure, his presence commanding despite the weariness in his voice. "Earth," he spoke, his accent heavy but clear. "You've come." Vance stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "We received your signal. We're here to help." The general looked at her with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You do not understand. We are on the brink of extinction. The Zothraxians, they are coming. And they will not stop until we are all gone." The words hit like a slap. The Zothraxians, the enemies who had driven these peaceful beings to the edge of annihilation, were real. And now, humanity was involved in a war not of their choosing. Vance took a deep breath, meeting the general's gaze. "Tell me everything. We'll do whatever it takes to stop them." In that moment, the Prometheus and its crew became more than just Earth's first interstellar expedition. They became humanity's last hope. The galaxy was on the edge of war, and Earth was about to find itself at the center of it. General Threx's words hung in the air like a dark omen as he led the crew deeper into the wreckage of the space station. The survivors were scattered, working tirelessly to maintain whatever systems still functioned. Their movements were slow, deliberate, each action taken with the care of beings who knew their time was running out. Captain Vance followed the general closely, her mind racing with the implications of everything she was hearing. "The Zothraxians," Threx continued, his voice low but filled with a venomous edge. "They are an unstoppable force. Their technology is beyond comprehension. We are a peaceful people, isolated from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. We never sought conflict, but they came. And they destroyed. They obliterated entire fleets, whole star systems, without mercy." Vance exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Malik, who was listening intently. His fingers were twitching, as if trying to process the enormity of what they were hearing. They had learned so much already, but still, so much remained a mystery. "They came without warning," Threx continued, his voice growing weaker, "with weapons that no one could have imagined. Our ships couldn't withstand their attacks. Our best warriors couldn't stop them. We tried to fight, to survive, but it was like trying to hold back a storm with nothing but our hands. We are the last of our kind." The tension in the room was suffocating. The Xylaxians' desperation was palpable, and yet, in the face of it all, there was something unsettling about their helplessness. They had fought, but the Zothraxians had proven too powerful. Vance couldn't shake the growing unease that had settled in her chest. The question that lingered in her mind was simple. Why had the Zothraxians chosen the Xylaxians to destroy in the first place? What made this species so important? Tell us everything you know about them, Vance said, her voice steady but firm. Their tactics, their technology, anything that can give us an advantage. Threx nodded solemnly. Their ships are unlike anything we've ever encountered. They are faster, more agile, and their weapons can tear through our hulls like paper. They have no mercy, no remorse. When they attack, they don't just kill, they obliterate. Their goal is not just to conquer, it's to erase us completely. He paused, as if weighing his words. We've learned over the course of the war that the Xylaxians are a collective. They don't have a single leader. They are governed by an intelligence shared across their entire species, like a hive mind. They think as one, and that makes them far more dangerous than any empire we faced. Admiral Huxley, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up. A hive mind? That's a new one. How do they communicate? If they're all connected, how do we fight something like that? Threx's eyes narrowed, his expression grim. It's not just their communication that makes them deadly. They have a weapon, an energy pulse that disables ships instantly. It disintegrates everything in its path, leaving nothing but the void behind. We've lost entire fleets to it. We don't even know how they do it. Vance's stomach tightened at the thought. If this was true, Earth was facing an enemy unlike anything they could have prepared for. A species that thought as one, with technology capable of annihilating entire fleets in an instant. Could they stand a chance against them? Was there even a way to fight back? We've been hiding, Threx said, his voice cracking with the weight of his words. We thought we could rebuild, regroup, maybe even find a way to stop them. But now we know. There is no escaping the Xylaxians. They will find us wherever we go. They always do. The silence that followed was suffocating. The reality of the situation had just hit home. This wasn't just a simple rescue mission. This was war. The Xylaxians had been wiped from the map, and Earth's involvement would either mark the beginning of humanity's rise as a galactic power, or the end of their existence in the universe. We have to stop them, Vance said, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, resolute. We can't let this happen to us. We will find a way to fight back. But even as she spoke those words, doubt crept into her mind. Could they really fight an enemy like this? Was Earth ready for a war on this scale? The unknown stretched out before them, darker than any of them could comprehend. But one thing was certain. Humanity had just been thrown into the heart of an intergalactic conflict, and it would take everything they had to survive. As the crew of the Prometheus continued their investigations aboard the Xylaxian station, the weight of the mission bore heavily on their shoulders. Every conversation with General Threx and the surviving Xylaxians had added more urgency to their mission. The Xylaxians were not just an enemy. They were a force of nature, relentless, and capable of erasing civilizations without warning. Captain Vance had no illusions about the odds they were up against, but she also knew that retreat was no longer an option. Earth had been thrust into the heart of an interstellar conflict, and it was up to them to figure out how to survive. We need to move quickly, Admiral Huxley said as the team gathered in the Prometheus's briefing room. His voice was clipped, sharp. Every second we waste is another second for the Xylaxians to catch up with us. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is they'll detect our presence. Vance nodded, her mind already racing through the possibilities. What are our options? We need to find a way to counter their energy pulse. If we don't, we're sitting ducks. Dr. Malik, still poring over the fragments of the Xylaxian signal, looked up from his datapad. The Xylaxians might have the answer. They've been trying to reverse engineer the technology from the few Xylaxian ships they've captured. It's possible that they've developed a countermeasure, or at least some understanding of their technology. Vance turned to the general, who had remained quiet during the briefing, his face etched with exhaustion and concern. General Threx, do you have any information on a potential countermeasure? Anything at all? Threx hesitated, his alien features drawn with a deep sadness. We've tried everything. Their technology is based on principles we don't fully understand. It's not just their weaponry, it's their very way of thinking, their biology. It's all interconnected. We can't fight them the way we fought each other, or even the way we fought other species. They're different. Cruz stepped forward, her voice steady, but with a sharp edge of determination. We don't have time for this. We need a solution, or we're all going to be dead before we even get started. Frex's eyes darkened. I know, and I'm sorry. I failed my people. Vance placed a hand on the general's arm, her voice softer. We haven't failed yet. We have Earth's resources at our disposal. We have knowledge, strength, and most importantly, we have time. We've fought battles like this before. We can win. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the crew. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. This was about a future, a chance to protect not just Earth, but the galaxy itself from the annihilation that the Xylaxians promised. Every choice, every action would determine whether humanity could rise to the occasion or be wiped from existence, like the countless civilizations that had come before them. Let's start looking for any data that might give us a fighting chance, Vance said, her voice resolute. Dr. Malik, I want you to focus on every scrap of information that Xylaxians have on Xylaxian technology. Huxley, begin mapping out a strategy based on the worst-case scenarios. Cruz, Donovan, prepare the Prometheus for a possible engagement. We may not have much time. The crew dispersed, each member moving with a sense of urgency that mirrored the gravity of their situation. They were now operating in a race against time, with the Xylaxian threat looming closer with every passing moment. Days passed with little progress, and the tension aboard the Prometheus grew. They had discovered traces of Xylaxian ships in the vicinity, moving toward the Xylaxian system at a staggering speed. The survivors aboard the station had given them all they could, but it still wasn't enough. Without a clear understanding of how the Xylaxians' energy pulse worked, they were left with no choice but to prepare for the inevitable. One night, as Vance stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, staring out at the swirling void of space, the ship's sensors suddenly blared to life. A new reading appeared on the screens, one that made her blood run cold. Xylaxian ships, multiple signatures, appeared on the outer rim of the system. They had arrived. They're here. Cruz's voice came through the intercom, tight with tension. We've got incoming. Vance's heart raced. All hands, battle stations, prepare for combat. This is it. The Xylaxian storm had finally broken, and humanity's survival would depend on how they weathered it. The Prometheus shuddered as its engines roared to life, the deep hum vibrating through the ship's hull. Every crew member moved with precision, as if they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The battle they had prepared for, had dreaded, was no longer a distant threat. It was here, and they had no choice but to face it. Captain Vance stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the holographic displays, watching the enemy fleet grow larger with every passing second. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they had no other option but to fight. Captain. Admiral Huxley's voice broke through the tension, his words tight with urgency. We have to assume the Xylaxians will use their energy pulse as soon as they're in range. We need to get ahead of that and disrupt their targeting systems. Vance nodded, her mind working through the options. I know. We don't have a lot of time to prepare, but we'll make every second count. If they fire that pulse, we're done. But if we can outmaneuver them, disrupt their targeting, we might have a shot. Dr. Malik's voice echoed from the back of the command center. There's still no guarantee we can figure out how their pulse works in time. But if we could get close enough to a Xylaxian ship, perhaps we can gather data directly from the source. Maybe even identify a weakness. Vance's eyes flicked to the holographic map, her fingers tapping lightly on the console as she plotted the trajectories. The Xylaxian fleet was now within striking distance. Their ships were massive, towering structures that seemed to glisten with deadly intent, their sleek black forms cutting through space like predators on the hunt. Lieutenant Cruz, Vance said, her voice commanding. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're going to need to move fast and stay unpredictable." Kruz's eyes narrowed. "Understood, Captain. We won't make it easy for them." Huxley turned to Vance, his face grim. "We need to be ready for the worst. If we don't manage to get close enough to the enemy, we're going to have to rely on the Prometheus's shields to take the brunt of their attack. But even our best shields won't hold up for long if they hit us directly." Vance clenched her fists, trying to shake the rising doubt that threatened to overtake her. She had always been able to trust her crew, but now, with so much on the line, she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. They were humanity's last hope. If they failed, it wouldn't just be the Xylaxians who would perish. "Everyone knows what's at stake here," she said, turning to face her crew, her tone steady but fierce. "We're going to survive this, together. We'll fight until there's nothing left to fight for. Let's give them a battle they won't forget." With that, the crew of the Prometheus sprang into action. The ship lurched forward, its thrusters flaring as it tore through space, heading directly toward the Xylaxian fleet. The ship's sleek silhouette cut through the blackness, a stark contrast to the dark shapes of the Xylaxian vessels looming ahead. The tension was palpable, every crew member on edge, knowing that a single wrong move could be their last. As they closed the distance, Vance watched the Xylaxian ships grow larger, their weapon systems powering up. The readings on the sensors confirmed their worst fears. The Xylaxians were preparing to fire the energy pulse. The entire system seemed to hold its breath, as if the universe itself was waiting for the storm to break. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, now," Vance shouted, her voice sharp. Kruz's hands flew across the controls, the Prometheus veering sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding the deadly energy pulse that erupted from the nearest Xylaxian ship. The blast sent shockwaves through space, distorting the space around them like ripples in water. The Prometheus shuddered violently, but its shields held strong. "We've avoided the pulse, but they'll fire again," Kruz reported, her voice trained. "Keep them on their toes," Vance said, her voice calm despite the storm that raged around them. "We need to get closer now." The Prometheus surged forward, weaving and dodging, as the Xylaxian fleet fired relentlessly. The ship's shields flickered with every impact, but they were holding. Just. Vance gritted her teeth, her eyes locked on the Xylaxian flagship. It was massive, more powerful than anything Earth had ever encountered. And if they could just get close enough, maybe, just maybe, they could figure out a way to disable it. "Lieutenant Donovan," Vance called, "prepare for an emergency boarding. We need to get aboard that flagship. Malik, you're with me. Let's go." As the rest of the crew kept the Prometheus fighting, Vance, Malik, and Donovan suited up and made their way to the shuttle bay. The fate of their world now rested on their ability to board and disable the heart of the Xylaxian fleet. With one last glance at the Prometheus's shaking hull, Vance stepped into the shuttle, her resolve steeling with each passing second. The storm was far from over, and the battle for Earth had just begun. The shuttle bay doors sealed with a heavy hiss, and the small craft launched from the Prometheus, cutting through the chaos of the battle unfolding outside. Captain Vance's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the high stakes of the mission. The Xylaxian flagship loomed ahead, a dark monolith in space, its jagged edges glowing with ominous energy as it prepared to fire again. Time was slipping away, and the shuttle had only a brief window of opportunity before the Xylaxians would bring their full might to bear. "Ready for this?" Lieutenant Commander Donovan's voice crackled through Vance's comms, her tone sharp and focused. "As ready as we can be," Vance replied, tightening her grip on the controls. She glanced at Dr. Malik, who sat beside her, his face tense as he monitored the shuttle's systems and data streams. His hands flew over the console, accessing encrypted Xylaxian frequencies and attempting to decipher the alien communications. "There's a weak spot in their energy grid," Malik muttered, eyes narrowing as he studied the data. If we can get close enough to that section, I think I can overload their systems and disrupt the pulse weapon. It's risky, but it might just work." Vance nodded grimly. "Risk is what we're dealing with now. Let's get in, disable the weapon, and get out. We don't have much time." The shuttle raced toward the flagship, weaving through a barrage of enemy fire as the Xylaxians fired their pulse weapons in furious succession. The Prometheus's shields flared brightly, absorbing the blasts, but the smaller shuttle had no such luxury. Every shot that missed the Prometheus now threatened to tear through the fragile shuttle hull. Kruz's voice came through the comms, distorted by the violence of the battle. "Captain, be careful. The Xylaxian flagship is powering up for another pulse. You need to get in there now, or you won't have another chance." Vance's eyes never left the flagship. Her hands danced across the controls, expertly maneuvering the shuttle through the firestorm, as if she were born to fly. Behind her, Donovan checked their weapon systems one last time, her face taut with determination. She knew that their success, or failure, rested entirely on their ability to get close to the heart of the Xylaxian war machine. Suddenly, the flagship fired again, and the world outside the shuttle became a blinding flash of energy. The shuttle's shields screamed in protest as they absorbed the pulse's shockwave. The hull rattled violently, and for a moment, it seemed as though they might be torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. But Vance held her breath, pushing the shuttle forward as it careened dangerously toward the flagship's exposed docking bays. "We're in," Vance shouted, her voice taut with adrenaline. "Prepare for boarding." The shuttle rocketed toward the massive docking bay, its landing gear scraping the cold metallic surface as it skidded to a halt. The Xylaxian flagship's hull loomed around them, dark and foreboding, its surface etched with strange alien symbols that pulsed with eerie, otherworldly energy. The shuttle's doors hissed open, and Vance, Donovan, and Malik rushed out, weapons raised, their boots clanging on the cold metal floor. "Stay sharp," Vance ordered, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "We don't know what kind of resistance we'll face in there." The corridor ahead of them was eerily silent, the air thick with the metallic scent of alien technology. Every step felt like an eternity as they moved deeper into the flagship, guided only by Malik's data readout and the flashing indicators that pointed toward the heart of the enemy vessel. "Keep moving," Vance urged, her eyes flicking from one end of the hallway to the other. The silence was unsettling, unnatural. They had no idea what kind of defenses the Xylaxians had on board, or if they would encounter any opposition. But Vance couldn't afford to wait. Every second they spent searching was another second the Xylaxian fleet had to fire on the Prometheus. Finally, they reached a massive chamber, its walls lined with pulsating energy conduits. In the center of the room stood a large spherical object, an ominous core of alien power, surrounded by a web of energy barriers and defense systems. This, Vance realized, was the heart of the Xylaxian pulse weapon. "We're here," Malik breathed, his fingers moving quickly to interface with the alien technology. "I can't believe this. This is incredible." "Cut the chatter," Donovan snapped, her eyes scanning the room. "We've got no time for a science lesson. Disable the weapon." Malik worked quickly, his hands moving with precision as he hacked into the Xylaxian systems. The energy barriers flickered, sparking as the alien code resisted his attempts to bypass it. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he fought to unlock the final encryption. Almost there, just a few more seconds. The tension was suffocating. Every footstep, every breath felt like it was measured in seconds. The Xylaxians wouldn't let them stay here long. They were sure to realize the breach soon. Then, with a soft hiss, the energy barriers flickered and shut down, leaving the core vulnerable. Malik exhaled sharply. Done. The pulse weapons offline. For now. "Let's go," Vance shouted, turning on her heel. The countdown had already begun, and there was no time to waste. The Prometheus needed them. Earth needed them. The battle for humanity's future was far from over, The hallway of the Xylaxian flagship shook violently as explosions rumbled through the ship, the aftershock of the disrupted energy pulse sending waves of tremors across the metallic floor. Captain Vance's heart raced as she and her team sprinted back toward the shuttle bay, adrenaline surging through her veins. The moment Malik had deactivated the pulse weapon, they had effectively cut the Xylaxians' most devastating advantage. But the battle was far from over. The flagship would not stand idly by. It would fight to the last. "Move, move, move," Donovan barked, her voice filled with urgency as they pushed forward, their boots pounding the cold metal. Behind them, the ship's systems were already struggling to stabilize. Alien alarms blared, echoing through the ship's vast, sterile halls, signaling that their presence had been detected. Vance's eyes darted to Malik, who had already plugged his device into the Xylaxian terminals to track the fleet's movements. "How much time do we have before they know what we did?" Malik's face was pale, his brow furrowed in concentration. "A few minutes at best. The moment they regain control, this entire flagship will lock down. And if the Xylaxians realize what we've done, they'll throw everything at us." "Then we make it count," Vance muttered, gripping her weapon tighter as they rounded a corner, heading toward the shuttle. "Don't stop. No one's dying today." The shuttle bay doors came into view, but so did the first signs of Xylaxian resistance, armored troops emerging from the shadows, their glowing red eyes scanning the area with deadly intent. "Ambush," Donovan shouted, her voice cutting through the air as she raised her weapon. Without a moment's hesitation, the crew opened fire, the sharp crackle of energy weapons ringing out as the Xylaxian soldiers retaliated. Vance's breath quickened as she fired, taking down one of the armored figures with a single shot. "Don't waste time," she snapped. "We need that shuttle open now." Malik was already at the shuttle's control panel, his fingers flying over the interface as he bypassed the lockdown protocols. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, but the Xylaxians were closing in fast. Every second felt like a lifetime as Vance and Donovan kept the enemy at bay, firing rapidly while moving toward the shuttle. Another round of Xylaxian soldiers appeared at the far end of the hall, and the crew's fire began to slow. Vance's movements were mechanical, every shot another step toward survival. But the Xylaxians' relentless push made it clear that they would not let them escape without a fight. "Ready, Captain," Malik shouted, glancing over his shoulder as the shuttle's doors slid open. "Get in now." Vance didn't need to be told twice. She bolted for the shuttle, Donovan covering their rear as they dashed into the vehicle. The doors slammed shut behind them, and the shuttle lurched into motion. The engine roared as they raced toward the opening in the bay, the enormous Xylaxian flagship stretching out behind them like an ancient titan waking from its slumber. But the shuttle barely made it out before the Xylaxians retaliated. A barrage of plasma fire shot across the bay, barely missing the shuttle's tail as it shot forward, darting into the black void of space. Outside, the Prometheus loomed, its silhouette a familiar beacon of hope. "Hold on," Kruz's voice crackled through their comms. "We've got a window. Get back here fast." The shuttle jerked violently as it shot into open space, narrowly avoiding the flurry of returning fire from the Xylaxian fleet. The Prometheus's weapons fired, blasting the incoming shots into oblivion as they created an opening for the retreating shuttle. Vance's breath came in short bursts as she gripped the controls, steering them toward the Prometheus. The Xylaxian ships were closing in quickly, but they couldn't allow themselves to be caught. They were barely halfway back when another pulse shot exploded in the distance, a reminder of the Xylaxians' devastating weaponry. "Almost there," Donovan shouted as they hurtled toward the Prometheus's docking bay. "Get ready for a hard landing." The shuttle hit the Prometheus's hangar bay with a bone-jarring thud, its landing gear screeching against the floor. Without hesitation, the crew poured out, rushing toward the bridge as alarms sounded all around them. The Xylaxian fleet was upon them. "Status report," Vance barked as she entered the bridge, her gaze locking with Kruz, who stood at the helm. "We've got a full Xylaxian fleet on our tail," Cruz said, her face tight with focus. "They've already launched their reinforcements. We can't outrun them." Vance's mind raced. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and exhausted. But they weren't dead yet. Not while there was still a chance. The Xylaxian flagship had been crippled, and with the data they'd gathered, Earth had the key to understanding their enemy. It wasn't over. Not yet. "We're going to make this work," Vance said firmly. "This is humanity's stand. We've faced worse odds before. And we're going to do it again. All hands, prepare for battle. We'll fight until we can't fight anymore. We'll die standing if we have to." The crew rallied, the fire in their eyes burning brighter than the stars around them. This was their moment, their fight, and they weren't going down without one hell of a fight. The storm raged, but humanity had just found its thunder.